Today's scripture reading is from Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 5 through 11. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. I was the cupbearer to the king. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
In the last few years, whenever I've been driving somewhere in the United States, maybe Indiana, Florida, Colorado, wherever we might be, I've started noticing something that I had not noticed for years. And that was as I was going down the highway and come up behind a truck and saw something on the back of it. Can you get it up there? There we go. And saw that logo on the back of a truck. Now, whenever I would see that logo on the back of the truck for Wabash National, I have two thoughts. One thought is, I bet that trailer was in Lafayette, Indiana at some point in its lifetime. And the second thing is, I know someone who had something to do with how that trailer was constructed. Rod Ehrlich, who was a member of our church, Rod died back in the fall of 2018, but he was one of the founders of Wabash National and was passionate about trailers, semi-trailers. Rod was a mechanical engineer. Now, Rod was passionate about semi-trailers, and if you ever engaged him in a conversation about semi-trailers, he was more than happy to talk to you about it. He was more than happy to answer your questions, but also what normally happened in that process was that he would also begin to talk about kind of the current problem that he was dealing with. Rod saw solving a problem as an opportunity to make something better. Now, I remember sitting in a restaurant on more than one occasion when Rod would take the placemat and turn it over, and he would begin drawing. Sometimes it was on the back of a placemat, sometimes it was on a napkin. I think I've got a picture of something on a legal pad here. He would start explaining the problem and also in the thought process that he was going through to solve that problem or make things better. He was always enthusiastic about what he was working on, and even though he did his best to try and help me or others understand the problem, what it was he was doing, we couldn't comprehend it on the level that he did. But his enthusiasm was contagious as he shared that vision, as he shared that dream about what it was that he was seeking to do to make a semi-trailer better or safer or able to be produced more economically. Today we're beginning a sermon series that we're calling Dare to Dream. Now, we want to encourage you to dream God's dream, to catch God's vision. We want to encourage you to be faithful stewards of the opportunities that God gives you, to be faithful stewards of the dreams and visions that God gives to you, to be a faithful steward of the time and talent that God gives you, to be a faithful steward of the resources that He has entrusted into your care. We're going to, during this series, as we consider this topic of daring to dream, we're going to be looking at the story of Nehemiah. But before we talk about the story of Nehemiah, some of the verses that were read for us this morning, I want to just give you a little bit of a reminder about Nehemiah and the children of Israel. The children of Israel were descendants of Jacob. They were God's chosen people. But because of their disobedience, God allowed them to be conquered. And they went into captivity or were exiles in the land of their enemies. The brightest and the best, the strongest and the healthiest were taken away as slaves, while those who were older and infirmed and not as strong, not as productive, they were left in Jerusalem. Well, as we come to the story of Nehemiah, about 140 years have passed. Now, Nehemiah has never lived in Jerusalem. I'm not even sure that he's ever had a chance to visit Jerusalem, but he knew it was the place from which he descended. He knew it was the homeland. He knew that it was where his family had come from, and so he always had a vision. He always had a desire. He always had a love for Jerusalem. And one of Nehemiah's brothers came to visit and who had been in Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah asked him, tell me about Jerusalem. How are the people there? How is the city? Well, at that point, his brother gave him a report that the walls of the city were broken down. The people of the city were facing great trouble. And the passage tells us that Nehemiah was greatly troubled within his spirit. And in verse 4, the verse that is just before what we read this morning, Nehemiah heard about the conditions in Jerusalem, and it says that he wept. He cried. He was broken before God. For several days he mourned and fasted. Now, as a result of his brokenness, as a result of him falling down before God, I believe that God gave Nehemiah a vision and a dream. This wasn't something that Nehemiah came up with on his own, but I believe that it was God inspired. And as we look in verses 8 and 9, Nehemiah, he confesses, his sins, the sins of his people. He remembered God's instructions to Moses, saying, "If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then I will gather you from the farthest places and bring you back to the place that I have promised you, the place I have chosen to give you." I don't believe that Nehemiah's vision or dream was something that he came up with on his own, but I believe it was inspired, that God was planting that dream, it was a God-ordained vision that he was given. Nehemiah prayed that God might show him mercy in order that he might be allowed to go to Jerusalem. Now, Nehemiah was not a free man. He may have experienced more privilege than some people, but still he wasn't his own, because he was a servant of the king. He was the cupbearer of the king. Now, the royal cupbearer, their job was to taste the wine of the king, or even taste the food of the king before the king ate it, in case it had been poisoned. So if something had been done to the food or the drink in order to try and kill the king, actually it was the cupbearer that would become ill or would experience death first, and he was a kind of a part of the security detail for the king, if you will. So Nehemiah had contact with the king on a regular basis because of his job, because of his position as the cupbearer. God gave Nehemiah a dream, and Nehemiah prayed that God might grant him favor. And when Nehemiah went to the king to do his job, the king recognized that Nehemiah was not having a good day. And verse 1 of chapter 2 says that Nehemiah had never been sad in the presence of the king before. The king could see that there was something that was bothering him because he didn't have his normal look. And in verse 2, it says that, of chapter 2, says that the king recognized his sadness of heart. Now, looking sad before the king was risky business. The king had enough problems of his own. He didn't need others coming and presenting their problems to him and bringing him down. So actually, a servant in the king's court who was not chipper and upbeat and uplifting to the king, they were in danger of losing their position or even possibly losing their life, depending upon the mood of the king at that point. But the king asked Nehemiah, "Why is your face so sad?" Nehemiah realized this was the moment. This was the moment that he had been praying for, and at the end of verse 2, Nehemiah acknowledges that he was very much afraid. Nehemiah tells the king that what's bothering him and how he's broken over what's happening in Jerusalem. And so the king said to him, "What do you want?" Now, before responding to the king, chapter 2 tells us that Nehemiah prayed. Nehemiah knew this was it. It's now or never. This is what I've been praying for. And either the king will grant my wish, or the king may have me done away with. And so Nehemiah asked the king. He said, "Can you give me leave? Can I have some time off that I can go back to Jerusalem and organize rebuilding the wall to help the city to be more secure there?" And not only that, King, could you provide some provisions? Could you provide maybe a letter of recommendation that would give me safe passage through other places? Would you maybe authorize people to give resources of your kingdom to accomplish the work that I want to do? Nehemiah had asked for a lot. But the king showed favor to Nehemiah. Not only did he give him supplies and letters of recommendation, but it says that he also sent part of the army with him as a security detail as well. When we embrace God's vision, when we embrace God's dream, we can trust him with the details. God can make a way when there seems to be no way. Does anyone know what happened 6 years ago on this very day? Chloe was baptized. That wasn't on my radar, and you were in Florida at that point. 6 years ago today, our congregation dedicated the addition to the building. It was on January the 8th, 2017. It was a God-sized vision. It was a God-sized dream. But the vision and dream was not simply about a building. The vision and dream was about investing in people. It was about investing in our community. You know, as I've thought about what are some of the things that have happened in the expansion of the building over the last 6 years, you know, I don't have time to talk about all of them, but just to give some highlights. You know, it was a gathering place. It is a gathering place for our community when it's faced with tragedy. You know, it's been a place where police officers from different departments and different arms of law enforcement came together when one of their own had died. You know, it's a place where there have been thousands and thousands of meals that have been prepared and served. It's a place where, you know, we've done soup for the soul. We've done the community Thanksgiving meal. There have been funeral dinners that have been served there. There have been gatherings of community groups as well as student groups that have met in that space. You know, it's a place where children and adults play basketball and do Zumba and other exercise in a number of ways. It's a place where over 200,000 meals have been packaged that has then gone to the local food pantry and literally gone around the world helping those who with food insecurity. And in doing so, bringing over 1,000 people together from our community to do those packing events. It's a place where scouts have gathered, open houses and celebrations have taken place. The preschool and daycare have impacted our community, and the master plan has helped the daycare and preschool to expand, although that was not a part of the vision. That was a byproduct. That was something secondary that came along. I don't know that you all know this. Before Christmas, the preschool had their Christmas program in Connection Court. And there were so many kids and so many parents that they had to divide them into two groups. And in one evening in Connection Court, there were two groups of over 250 people that were overflowing for that preschool program. You know, God gave us a vision, God gave us a dream with the master plan, but it's not about a building. It's about a building that has been a conduit, has been a source for us to be a part of ministry. We're not done dreaming. And I don't believe that God is done planting dreams and visions in the hearts and minds of those who humble themselves before Him.